Hey guys, we are here with John Paul Le Bosnoyani. Did I say that right?
Yep, you sure did.
All right, he is French. He is real French. His nickname is Mufasa, and I like to ask everybody who has an interesting nickname how they got their nickname. So let's just get that out of the way right now.
Yeah, so pretty much my whole life I've always either thought like my spirit animal was either like a lion or a tiger. So when I started fighting, I had to come up with a nickname, and my dad thought of what lion means where he's from, and that's Mufasa. And I'm not sure how that works or what that means, but I was kind of going for that for a little bit, but no one knew what that meant. Mm-hmm. So eventually one day, one of my buddies was just kind of joking around, and it's like, dude, you like the Lion King, like Mufasa? And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it just sort of stuck. Like all my buddies were like, yo, Mufasa. Like when I train, people call me Mufasa. So it stuck really well, and I think it really portrays like, you know, who I am, and what that is sort of like, you know, someone who I don't want to say I'm at the top, but in my head, you know, I always think that, you know, I'm constantly climbing, and I'm a lion, and I have to go out and you know, challenge other people, or, you know, defend, you know, my people and my tribe, and you know, that's sort of what Mufasa means to me.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I believe in visualization, you know, and so it's okay to think you're the king of the jungle right now, because that's what they say. If you see it and you believe it, you become it, right? Awesome. Well, if you guys didn't know, John Paul is 6-0. He's actually the first amateur fighter that I've interviewed. I think he's special, and I think that he's going places, so I want to get him now, and maybe when he's UFC champ, he'll remember me and give me an interview. So he's 6-0 amateur, but some things that I want to just tell everybody, because it's not just like you're undefeated, no big deal. John Paul has a total cage time of 7 minutes in his 6 fights. That means his average finishing time is under 1 minute. Like, you go watch him fight and don't blink, you know, don't go get popcorn, don't look away. He's going to finish the fight very quickly, and he's only been out of the first round, I believe it was one time, correct?
One time, yeah. There was one time where I wanted to sort of, you know, be in the cage a little bit longer, and I was, you know, lucky enough to where I was in a really dominant position towards the end of the first round, and I said, hey, what the heck, you know, like, let's go to the second round and, you know, see how this plays out. But yeah, no, I say it every time. I'm always like, you know, I really need to, you know, have a little more cage time, you know, feel it out. And I'm like, people ask me, you know, what do you see happening? It's like, you know, I want to work my stand-up. I want to do this. I want to do that. But, like, the second the bell rings, it's like the line comes out of me, and sort of everything sort of takes over. Yeah. So it's tough. Yeah.
I don't think many people can say, you know, it's so easy for me to win my fights. I have to force myself to go into the second round. So that's pretty amazing. Another amazing thing about John Paul is that you've only been fighting for 10 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe 10 months. I sort of stopped keeping track, but I started fighting, I believe, March of last year. And I would have loved to fight earlier, but when I turned 18 was when I could start fighting MMA. So as soon as I could get a fight, you know, I jumped in the cage, and I just sort of kept knocking him down for the rest of the year.
Yeah. So he just mentioned it. If you couldn't tell from this young, handsome face, he is only 18 years old, and he's just knocking him down left and right. 6-0. His next fight, which we'll get into very shortly after we talk a little bit about his background, is January 20th at the Forum for one of the biggest stages in the MMA world, Bellator. And before we talk about that, I just want to know a little bit about how you got started in MMA. What disciplines have you trained, and what keeps you in MMA?
Yeah, I started training MMA, or not MMA, but I was introduced into the sport by my dad, who owns a gym in Hermosa Beach, and I was introduced to the sport. I was pretty much born into it, because that's pretty much all he does, and he was Hoist Gracie's coach all through Pride and UFC. Yeah, he was one of his coaches.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so you know, I'm really fortunate to be sort of born into the sport. And so jiu-jitsu I've been doing my whole life, and I've had a basic understanding of stand-up, but it wasn't until this year that I really like expanded my like stand up and you know, mixing all of my martial arts together. And also to mention, I wrestled almost 5 years before high school and then all through high school. Yeah, so, and I did really well, you know, for me, because it's not really something that I was good at. Sort of, I tell people I jiu-jitsu'd my way through wrestling. But I was fortunate enough to place 8th in state my senior year, so that was pretty huge for me. And then from then, it was kind of like once wrestling season was over, it was like MMA, you know, and I graduated, and MMA was like the next big step for me. And, you know, my coaches have really like taken my stand-up to a whole new level from my like first fight till now, and that's only been 10 months. I feel like I've like made a huge leap as far as like my confidence comes on my feet, and that's all thanks to Brian Ortega, my coach Pablo Melegar, and Mike Safai, who've all like sort of, you know, helped integrate boxing, kickboxing, and jiu-jitsu and everything together. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I did not know that about being born into the sport. That's amazing. So if you were born into the jiu-jitsu world initially, would you consider yourself a jiu-jitsu based like fighter? Or if you had to describe yourself, would you say you're freestyle? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, so it's funny, I hear this like wherever I go, people will sort of categorize me in different places, and honestly it kind of pisses me off sometimes. For instance, some people will think I'm a wrestler, you know, like I wrestled 5 years of my life. I've been doing jiu-jitsu since I was a kid. And it kind of ticks me off because, you know, I think of myself as a well-rounded martial artist, and eventually I want to become, you know, an even more well-rounded as far as like my stand-up, my jiu-jitsu, my ground, and that's what I want to do. I want to be the best in the world at all of those things and putting all of those things together. And I definitely don't want to think of myself, and I don't think of myself as like one-dimensional when it comes to any martial art.
Well, I mean, you just told us, you know, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, you're working your hands, so it sounds like you're very well-rounded. And if you've seen any of his fights, he's definitely well-rounded. You should be afraid of him in any area. So that's pretty awesome. You mentioned Brian Ortega, Mike Safai. So what gyms do you train at, and who are your coaches?
Yeah, so that gets pretty like complicated. Yeah, I kind of jump around a little bit. I do my competitive jiu-jitsu training because I also compete in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so I do that here at Carlson Gracie South Bay, and I have amazing teammates and amazing coach that push me, you know, every single day, and have really sort of sharpened my mind when it comes to the sports jiu-jitsu sort of mentality and the way that the sport has evolved. It's very different than what I grew up on. I grew up on a very traditional jiu-jitsu, kind of like submission only, but now there's points and all this crazy stuff. So that's why I've learned so much here. So I do most of my jiu-jitsu training here, and then I would say my jiu-jitsu for MMA I do at the Gracie Academy with Hiron Henner and Mike Safai and Brian Ortega, and you know, it's just a different mentality, and I think the more diverse you are, the better, and the more people that can influence you, the better. And then I do my boxing training at TG Boxing Gym, Team Garcia. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty set, and I'm really happy with where I'm at right now as far as like my coaches and my training partners, and, you know, where I'm at overall.
That's awesome. I mean, you are undefeated. You are on a great winning streak. You're about to fight for one of the biggest organizations in the world. So I think you've got a very solid group of people backing you. And nowadays, it's hard to have one gym. I find that most successful fighters are bouncing around, getting, you know, the best of each discipline in different areas. So you're not the only one.
Yeah, and it gets pretty, like it puts me in a weird situation. I'm sure it puts, you know, other people out there too, but it gets kind of tough because you don't want to step on people's toes, you know, and there's a very fine line, and I just try to do my best, and I, you know, support everybody who helps me out.
Well, let's talk about your next fight. It is January 20th at the Forum, and it's right down the street, so it's kind of like, you know, I mean, I think most of your fights have been in your backyard. Do you like the fact that it's close by and all your friends and family can come, or is that a little more added pressure?
Yeah, no, I love it when, you know, I call it like my pride like my lion pride, or like a Mufasa gang.
Tribe.
Yeah, I use that hashtag, and it's sort of just like my army of people that come and support me, and it's just, you know, my friends from high school, from all my gyms, my family, and I love it because, you know, it pushes me, because one of the reasons why I fight is I don't like to let people down, and the people who put so much, you know, time and effort and care and love into me and into seeing me succeed, is like, that's one of the things that fuels me the most, is I don't want to let those people down. So I love it when they're there. It's just a reminder when I walk out and I see everybody, it's like, it's go time, you know.
Well, keep that mentality. It seems to be working for you. You are fighting Isaiah Culpepper, who is 7-0. We talked a little bit before the interview. You said you don't know much. Can you tell us what you do know exactly?
Yeah, I know that I'm pretty sure his background is wrestling, so I expect him, you know, coming in to take a takedown. But other than that, it's pretty. The way it works out for me is people sort of compare me to like professionals in this sport, and I'm not there yet. But where I'm at, it's like, everybody who I fought, there hasn't been any video on them, or very little. So, and I've taken fights on 1 day notice, and my mentality is sort of the same. It's just like, you know, I put in the hard work, and I work like I'm in camp constantly. I work smart, but I always have that mentality, so I'm always ready. So it really doesn't matter who steps in there with me. I'm going to do what I do, and so far that's been working out. So yeah. I'm pretty confident that, you know, my hard work is going to pay off. So
I actually remember when you took that fight on 1 day notice, I was in the audience, and I believe it was with a man who was like 30-something years old.
Yeah, that's my favorite. That's my favorite.
That was my first time seeing you fight, and I was like, I'm going to pay attention to this guy after this. So caught my attention. So that was awesome. Well, that's awesome. Isaiah doesn't have any film. I looked up his record. The only person that I recognized on his record was Jalen Turner, who happens to be fighting on the card as well. Pretty good fighter. And then he actually fights majority either at featherweight and lightweight, and you fought primarily at welterweight?
Yeah, so for a very long time, it wasn't like cockiness, but it was just sort of like a little thing inside me that was like, I want to be the best at whatever I'm at, whatever weight I'm at. So I would drop like 10 pounds. So I'd walk around 180, and I'd cut the day before 10 pounds and fight at 170. And that was working out great. But the reality of it is when I go pro, I'm going to be fighting guys that are cutting from like 200. And realistically, like, I'm going to get thrown around the cage. So the reason why, you know, I'm taking my time with being an amateur is to sort of feel out what it's like to be at 155. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what that feels like, as far as like how my strength is against my opponents. So far it's been fine. I've felt pretty solid even against guys that are pretty much all the guys that I've fought have been physically bigger than me. But so it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Well, there is definitely no rush. You know, I think a lot of people, like, you're young. You're on a good winning streak. You have a great group of people behind you. There's no point in going pro right now. I mean, unless that's what you want to do or what your coaches and your management thinks. But, you know, you do see a lot of people just rushing to get there, and the sport should be about longevity. You know, you take these last minute fights, but you got to be smart at the same time. No cherry picking, you know, no cherry picking, but you're at a great point, and so I can't wait to watch you fight, honestly. I wish we knew a little bit more about his background, and I could ask you about the style matchup and whatever, but I guess it might be a benefit, because then if you don't know anything about your opponents, then you just focus on you, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I've typically done. I mean, I sort of have an idea of what I want to do for this fight, but pretty much how I fought in the past is reactionary, and that's, you know, I go in there and whatever they give me, you know, I have an answer for it, and that's pretty much just because I put myself in the situation where, you know, this camp by far has been like the toughest and like smartest camps, if those were two words I could use. I've had the best guys helping me out, and I've had like some guys that are the best in the world, like Brian Ortega, Christos, Tommy Aaron, Travis Williams, Pablo Melgar, Mike Safai, pretty much everybody, and it's I've put in the work for sure. So I know that, you know, when it comes down to the fight, it's gonna work out.
Those are some tough South Bay guys.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So one of my last questions about your fight is, I don't think I've ever heard of Bellator doing amateur fights. Is this new, or how's that working? Is it going to be the undercard?
So I'm in a very good position, and it's all thanks to my manager and my agency CAA, and they've gotten me into this card, you know, with with maybe a future with Bellator, but pretty much what it is, I don't know of them doing it in the past, but you know, I'm using the platform of Bellator. I want to show the world, you know, my skill set, because I feel like a lot of people know me, but they don't know me. So I want to you know, show that on January 20th, and yeah.
It's going to be a great platform to expose yourself, you know, and let people know who you are, for sure. And to wrap up the interview, I want to talk about just a little bit about your idols and your goals. Who do you look up to in the sport, and then on the opposite end, where do you see yourself in the future? You know, 2, 3, 5 years from now.
Yeah. So who I look up to, my number one is definitely Brian Ortega. He you know, I've had a lot of people in the past, I've looked up to a lot of people in the past, and a lot of people have sort of like pushed me away, or, you know, stepped on me, or not really given me, you know, what a role model should do. You know, if I was in their position, I had an up and coming fighter looking up to me, you know, I would do the same that Brian's doing for me, and what he's done is pretty much everything. I mean, you know, I could tell that the guy really loves me, and he puts a lot of time and effort into me, and he wants to see me succeed. And I mean, I love absolutely everything he stands for, and I definitely want to follow in his footsteps, but at the same time, like, carve my own path. So yeah, Brian's definitely up there, and pretty much just my coaches and my teammates. Really, it's awesome to be surrounded by so many amazing people, you know.
Brian seems to be being a good role model and just leading by example.
Yeah. So I'm really blessed to have, you know, so many amazing people in my life. Yeah.
Well, just keep doing what you're doing. And are you selling tickets at all, or?
Yeah. So usually around this time, I'm like losing my mind trying to sell the remaining tickets, but it worked out really well. They pretty much sold themselves. So I'm all done, but. If you want to still get tickets, you can go on Ticketmaster and get some tickets.
Okay, cool. So John Paul is fighting again January 20th. That's actually this Saturday. I didn't even ask you. How's your weight? How are you feeling?
Yeah, so I'm at, right now it's Wednesday, right? Yeah, Wednesday. 162 pounds, so it's pretty good. I just got to, you know, keep it up. Yeah.
Well, that's about it. I'm going to ask John Paul, where can we find you on social media? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, so I mainly post everything on Instagram, and that's at Mufasa MMA, Mufasa MMA. And then on Facebook, it's just my name, Jean-Paul Bosnoyani. So those are pretty much my only two social media platforms. Everything else I kind of just don't really use. Yeah.
So would you like to thank any sponsors and your teammates or coaches, anything like that?
Yeah, I'd like to thank my agency, CAA, my teams, Carlson Gracie South Bay, the Gracie University, all my coaches. I've mentioned pretty much everybody, but yeah, I'm just, you know, really blessed to, you know, do this interview with you. I really appreciate you coming down here and doing it. I'm really excited about Saturday, and I can't wait for what the future has in store.
Well, good luck, John Paul. Don't miss him. One more time, Bellator 192 this Saturday, and it's going to be awesome. Like I said, don't blink because he finishes fights very quickly.